Welcome, Grandpa. I'm sure you're a little confused as to why I brought you to a podcast studio, but I thought that you have so much wisdom, it would be good to start recording some of it to spread with the people of the world, or even just your family, really. You know, you've been farming for 87 years. But yeah, are you excited to be here?
Yeah, I'm always confused with you because I don't know what's coming next.
I just gave you an address and told you to show up. You're good too. I don't need to pay you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So, yeah, the goal of this, is to glean as much information off of you before you kick the can.
Oh, yeah.
Not to be dramatic or anything like that, but you are one of the most successful people that I know. And I feel like you have a lot of principles that you can share with other people, especially in the farming industry. So, this isn't necessarily going to be a podcast series, but if it was, I had some podcast name ideas. So here, you can let me know which one's your favorite. Bucket Talk, Before I Croak, Don't Bury Me Yet, Gramps Before the Grave, From Dirt to Done, Still Kickin', Still Talkin', Old But Gold, Potato Tie, and Grandpa Die. But yeah, you have a lot of wisdom to extract out of you. So I got some questions here. But the first one, do you think I'm soft?
No, I don't think you're soft.
Do you think my generation is soft?
There's always soft people in generations. And maybe we're more so today because of fluency. It's what drives softness.
Yeah. So even in your generation growing up, you felt like there was soft people around you. Because I feel like when my generation thinks of your generation, we always think of you guys are such hard workers.
And that is true. But there is always the slacker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone hiding behind the cracks.
Yeah.
But growing up, you weren't a slacker. Like what was your story? How did you get into farming?
No, I'm DNA'd with energy. And the reason I got into farming was the whole community was farming. And, it was row crop farming, vegetables, and it was beautiful. And it was enticing because if you did things well, you could make $1. And that's what it was all about. And so I was DNA'd to farm. It was in my blood. Yeah.
You don't think you would have done any other job?
No. I worked for the municipality for 1 week. I had a tractor on the road and I was pulling a roller. Well, after that week, I was so bored to death. I never wanted to see it. Working on the job, guys quit a half an hour ahead of time, left me on the road because I could get one more run in. My parents had to come and pick me up 10 miles away.
Oh, man. So just DNA to farm, you knew it was always going to be something that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So a little history for everyone. Our farm is 105 years old now. You're a third-generation farmer. I'm a fifth-generation potato farmer. Do you want to give a little bit more history about our farm, how it came to be?
Well, Grandpa Heppel, my grandpa, came back from the First World War with 2 of his sons. All of them lived through it. And he was from England and had come across Canada, stayed in Red Deer for 5 years or 6 years trying to homestead, and they just about froze and died of starvation. It was so tough going back then. And he heard about West Coast being warmer. So he came out to Vancouver, and he just wanted to farm. And he moved to Cloverdale in 1905. And my dad was the first twins in Cloverdale. And he was 6 weeks old when they moved to Cloverdale. So we're rooted here. And Grandpa, just when he came back from the Second World War, they had soldier settlement package where they could borrow money and buy land and then pay it back over 25 years or something at 7% interest. It wasn't much of a break on interest. But, he just set up a perfect English farm. The house sat back from the road, and it had a nice arch out at the road with honeysuckle over the arch and a pathway leading up to the front door, and a driveway that went from the road all the way back to the barns and chicken barns and all that kind of stuff. And it was just flower beds everywhere.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's what he wanted to do. And then he had a heart attack, and my dad was working at Trail in the smelter, and he came home to farm with him. And, of course, Grandpa just turned the farm over to him.
Yeah.
And Grandpa passed in 1942.
1942. And it was 1920 that you bought the farmland that we're currently on now, right?
That's right. Yep.
Wow. That's awesome. So, I mean, a lot of people, when I said I was doing this with you, a lot of people were really excited to glean some knowledge from you. And one of the most popular questions was about the business side of farming. Like, you didn't have much schooling. You know, you finished high school, I believe, and you went to Briarcrest for a little bit. But how did you get so good at the business side of it?
Just learning on the job and learning from other people. When we got in the poultry business, my brother and I, we would take a day off and go visit even the poorest poultry grower, because he always did something a little unique, and we could build on that, because every person comes up with different ideas. And so we learned off. There was no courses at those days or anything, you know. We just learned as we went.
Yeah, there's a good saying, and it's a fool learns from his experience and no other way, right? So you're learning from other people's experience, but obviously you made some mistakes along the way. Is there like a mistake that sticks out to you that was like, that was the dumbest mistake I've ever made, or that was the biggest mistake I made in farming?
Well, one was we started growing onions because the area grew a lot of onions, but we didn't have enough black muck soil, and that's where onions grew good. And we hacked away at that for 10 years and didn't succeed. And it was the happiest day in my life when I sold the equipment and got out onions and put our efforts into potatoes.
Yeah. That's good, yeah. Happy that you put the efforts in potatoes, you know, what we're known for now. What about like the biggest like accident you've ever had? I remember my dad telling me some stories, but you've had a few run-ins with equipment.
Yeah, we have. We lost an employee one time that jammed his hand into a PTO shaft, and he was gone.
Wow.
Just, there was nothing else. He just choked to death right there on the machine. We've had one case where we taught our children how to drive tractors at very young ages. Like when you were 6 and 7 years old, you were driving a tractor. And one of the worst things that happened was I was baling hay, and I was with a young 18-year-old that was working for us, and my brother, who was over a half a mile away, sent my oldest grandson, my oldest nephew, with a brand new little tractor with a wagon down to me where I was baling hay. And this young fella, who was a good athlete, said, "Oh, they're going too slow, I'll go get them." And he ran up about a quarter of a mile and jumped on the tractor, but they had thrown 4 kids on the trailer. And in the process of changing seats from young Mike to this Danny guy, I guess Mike stepped on the side brake. Next thing we knew, the trailer and the tractor is in that big ditch, on the side ditch.
With 4 kids in it.
4 kids. I pulled the bin on the baler, and I had a front end loader and a chain, and I'm just barreling up there. And I could see Danny throwing kids out of the ditch. And my oldest son, who had had a bad accident on the farm and lost all his fingers except his index finger and part of his thumb, he was standing on the other side of the ditch, and he was black muck from his toes to the top of his head, and he was crying, and the only thing that was clean was where the tears were bubbling down his cheeks, and he was saying, "Daddy, why did Danny do this?"
Oh. It was a miracle that
it was a miracle.
all 10
Nobody
kids
was hurt.
survived. I think that's where WorkSafe, started to get developed because of things like that. Oh man. So a lot of lessons learned. Is there one lesson that sticks out from all the other ones that you'd like to pass on to the next generation about farming?
Well, we're so safety conscious now, and I think this is a good thing. And I just, farming is tough because many times, and you know this, you're working 12, 14-hour days. And people get tired, and that's when accidents happen, Thankfully, we are big enough now that we can double shift sometimes when we're planting. GPS has been a wonderful thing for us because we can plant all night long, and our rows don't even have a kink in them by morning, or they're not even out an inch.
Yeah.
And, that kind of stuff has really helped us,
So your advice would be just keep doing
Safety.
safe practices. Yeah.
Safety.
Yeah. And then on that vein too, like you've been farming for over 80 years. So you've seen a lot of innovation in the agriculture industry. What's one piece of innovation that sticks out to you as being a game changer in farming?
Well, really, I think it's hydraulics. Because prior to that, everything was just lifting by hand. And then when you got forklifts, and that's hydraulics, and hydraulics on your tractors, you weren't pulling levers to lift the plow. You just pushed the button. And the other thing today is GPSing. I mean, it has saved so much in regards to overspraying with chemicals, or being able to work all night planting, because when you work a field all day, a 50-acre field all day, and you got it, it's like a sponge if it rains. And if that happens, you're not planting for 2 or 3 days after that. So GPSing has been a big thing, because we just bring on a new crew, and they go right through the night. We've done that, had the field planted. Once it's planted, our rains are never that heavy that they do any harm,
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are the two big things I see.
Well, back in the day when they didn't have GPS, you could tell how good a farmer was by how straight his furrows were, right?
There was competition in our area, second to none, on who had the nicest, straightest rows.
Yeah. It's good. Gives you pride in what you're doing, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So here's the really hot topic here. Do you think that having more children equals having a better profit margin?
It certainly did for us. Have you got your hand out right now? Because our children were our workforce.
Yeah.
I had 3 boys. My brother had 3 boys. And, they learned to run everything from the tractors to the semis by the time they were 14 years old. And I'm talking semis on the farm, loading beside the potato combine and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And back then you said that you were running at like 30 or 40% profit margins, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's just because you're utilizing your God-given labor.
Yeah. But we ran with very little overhead. My brother and I ran the whole thing. And we had part-time mechanic, and we had added people to it for truck driving and that kind of stuff,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously you've had a lot of success in your life. If you wouldn't have sold your land and donated the money, you would be worth a few $100 million. But how do you define success now that you're 87 years old when you look back on your life?
Well, Tyler, you know that I am very spiritual, and I have the answer to life, and that's in Christ. And that's been one of our main anchors in our business, is putting God first in so many ways, whether it's with employees or, helping people out, like ugly potato days.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest miracle that you've seen on the farm? Because obviously there's been some hard years where you've really had to rely on that relationship with God.
The biggest miracle that ever happened was when we got the telecommunications center from the federal government, which is 305 acres, 210 of it is cleared. It's level sand soil. And I wanted to get into the early potato business, and you couldn't get in because Ladner and Richmond had it all tied up. But I went ahead and grew on this sand soil. And unfortunately, the other farmers didn't like me getting in there. And we had it set up so it was all good. And I was going to move my crop starting on a specific day. And these other farmers lied to the plant and said their product wasn't ready and there'd be a gap after Heppels finished their 65 acres. And anyway, I was promised I would ship 100 ton a day because we were coming in ahead of the market.
Yeah.
And the day we started, the other guys were hauling in, and their product was as big as mine. And we were dead in the water. We shipped 150 ton, 100 on Monday, 50 on Tuesday because they shut us down. I didn't have quota.
Yeah, so it would have just sat in the field and
rotted in the field.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I took the last load into the plant, and I went in and sat down with all four of the managers of the plant, CEO, the production manager, and all of them were there, and we talked that thing over. And they were going to do everything they could to move my product. Everybody felt sick about what had happened. And that night, God sent a rain. The rain was so heavy that the guys in Ladner and Richmond couldn't dig. And the phone was coming off the wall at 5 a.m, dig. And so we kept all our kids out of school, and we went harvesting, and it rained all day. And then it rained all night.
Wow.
And it rained all day. By this time, even though we were on straight sand soil, we were pulling the equipment through the fields. But we kept going. We kept the market going.
Yeah.
And before long, these farmers were offering to come and help us.
Wow.
Because they knew they had to keep the market going, or the wholesalers
go to the States, right?
Go to the States and they buy. And they'll buy for 2 weeks, and then everybody's finished.
Wow.
And anyway, the long and the short of the whole story is that by the end of a week, we had shipped 600 ton. But the spuds had grown so much, I still had 150 ton in the field. And we had 2 days off, and it rained again. And we shipped the whole thing, 750 ton.
So let's back up a little bit. This is what year?
1980.
This is 1980. So this is the current farmland that we still farm today.
That is right. Yeah.
And this is a land that we're trying to save from getting developed.
Right.
Right. So this land in 1980, it rained so much that no other farmer could harvest their land, correct?
Exactly right.
But you could because of how good the soil was.
Yeah.
And because of how good the soil was, you shipped over 1.3 million pounds of potatoes into BC.
Yeah.
That if you didn't have this land, it would have been United States product.
100%.
And not only 1.23 million pounds, they would have gone to United States for a few weeks, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So it saved millions of pounds of local produce here, hey?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like we should keep that field, hey? I don't know why they're trying to develop it.
No, there is a lot of push to get that land turned into cement buildings, you know.
Yeah. No, it's very inspiring. I think I've had a lot of people, like, you're kind of a legend. A lot of people come up to me and, say, oh, your grandpa did this for me or that for me. And, you've been a farmer, you farmed billions of pounds of produce, but I think you've been even more faithful in kind of being a fisher of men. And I remember hearing stories of you guys, donating profits to pay for 600 mattresses in an orphanage back in the day, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start Ugly Potato Day and why I enjoy doing it is it just builds on our legacy.
Well, I always wondered why you wanted to start that ugly potato day, but you got a little bit of push to you too, Tyler. When you do the first one and you only have 12 people show up or whatever it was very few. You didn't quit.
Yeah.
You went to the next one and then you had 300,
Mm-hmm.
and next one was 1,000 or something,
Yeah.
and it's just growing from there.
Well, and now we're planning for 30 to 40,000 people coming out to our next event, August 9th. And for those that don't know what Ugly Potato Day is, it's a day where we give out our produce for free to our community. There's 1 in 5 people here in British Columbia can't afford food and are food insecure. And there's potatoes that we can't sell just because of its looks. And it's not just us, it's also other farmers. So we've partnered with a dozen farmers to give away carrots, beets, parsnips, onions. We had apples. We had lettuce,
tomatoes.
and we had 15,000 people come out to our last event on the rainiest day of the year. It rained 3 inches that day. But I think that just goes to show that people are really hurting right now in Canada. And it's time for the farmers to step up. So that's what we're here for.
And I'm thankful, too, that you are so social media adept that you've got some other farms in Ontario doing it, and the U.S. And did you say somebody in England is doing it now? And
No, but in Idaho and Alberta and PEI. So, and we're going to do one in Kelowna as well on August 9th. So, yeah, it's definitely growing. I was going to ask you, though, what are your thoughts on my social media?
Well, I don't brag about my kids or my grandkids, but you're a top-notch guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Grandpa. No, I really appreciate that. Kind of going back into the farming side of things, obviously being a farmer, it can be very mentally draining. You've talked about how important it is to stay mentally healthy. How do you stay mentally healthy year after year?
I'm active. You know that. I'm 87, will be 88 this summer, and I enjoy going to the farm in the morning, and I don't do a lot, but they say I'm the gopher. Go get this, go get that, and I do quite a bit of buying and that kind of stuff, and it keeps you on your toes, Even like with driving out there in traffic, it doesn't bother me to drive in traffic because I'm doing it every day, So that, and of course on the spiritual side, I read the Word every day and commit the day to the Lord and walk with Him. And what a joy it is. Our life, my wife and I, is so exciting at our age, and we're very active with people. Our front door is always open, and, we've had many people with addictions living with us, and it just goes on from there, being active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that my generation struggles with right now is finding their purpose in life.
I agree.
It's such a hot topic right now as people are looking for their purpose in their career. They're looking for their purpose in their significant other. You seem to just found your purpose. And even at 87, you live such a fulfilled life. How can someone my age who's struggling with that find their purpose?
Well, you can always find your purpose. And it is difficult for this new generation when, young people today, when we left school, the first thing we were doing is buying a house. And you could afford to buy a house. You get a house in a lot for $6,000.
Wow.
And everybody, basically, not everybody, but I'd say 90% of the kids that went to school with owned a house. And today, your generation can't do that unless parents are jumping in with big dollars. And so, that's I see that as very negative,
So you think that leads to people not feeling their purpose, is them not being able to afford?
Absolutely. And they'll go to pubs on Friday night and spend their money rather than save money, like we all had to do, is save money. You know, what's the purpose in saving money if you can't own anything? And I mean, sure, there's an exception where young guys are making good decisions and they're good business people, you know.
Yeah. Interesting. And like you haven't drank in quite a few decades, right?
Yeah.
I usually find a lot of farmers, they either are sober or they're alcoholics. Why did you make that decision in your life to not drink?
Well, I had done my drinking up until I was 22 and a half years old, and there's not much purpose to the whole thing if you think it through, There's some very bad dead ends, and, as even going to school, I had friends that turned out to be absolute alcoholics, and dying young. But there were very few and far between, So bottom line is I needed money for equipment. I needed money to push the business ahead. And drinking expensive whiskey wasn't going to do that for me. So I just made that decision, my brother and I. And I haven't had a drink since 1960.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you. So you had the purpose of saving up for something and putting your money towards that and farming.
Yeah.
You should have bought more acres back then, Grandpa. That's awesome. So, a lot of people are asking me, you're 87, you're on the farm every day helping us out. When are you going to retire?
You'll find me out behind the barn one day. Then you'll know I'm laying flat and straight out, and I've retired.
Oh, that's good. I really like that. Yeah, I think when you enjoy life, you don't ever really want to retire, no. Right? I think there's a crazy stat. It's like 40% of men die 2 years after they retire. Right? They live for retirement and don't have a purpose.
That's right. I mean, I say, why go to Palm Springs and rot?
No, that's good. Grandpa, if there was like one piece of advice you could give to my generation who's wanting to get into agriculture, what would it be?
Don't give up. Persevere if you've got that desire. And it might not be in BC. You might have to move to Alberta or Saskatchewan. But there's opportunity still. And just keep going,
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so expensive now to buy land and buy equipment. But there is billions of dollars that are going to be turning hands here in the next 10 years with people a little bit younger than you retiring and not having the next generation step forward. Do you think there's an opportunity there to get into operations and buy in or earn in?
Yeah, and today, little 5-acre farms on Vancouver Island or even around here, people specializing in growing of fresh produce, and there's all kinds of opportunities still. It might not be the big farm that we farm. It can't be because, it's just millions of dollars to get started. But there's still opportunity. And I read my papers, Western Producer and that, and just see what people are doing across Canada. It's amazing. Just little mom and pa things on the farm. They're doing a milk product or a cheese product, or they're growing vegetables and they're packaging them, and people are coming and buying that package for so many dollars a week and all that kind of stuff. So if you're DNA to farm, you can still farm.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said. Even when you were farming with your brother, you would go visit very small operations and pick their brains and try to learn from them, right? Yeah. There's a lot of ways. I've heard of guys in Ontario they have 1 acre or 2 acres and they have 2 full-time employees.
Yes.
And they're making 6 figures off of 1 or 2 acres.
Yeah.
Right? So there's ways to do it. And people think you need millions of dollars. You don't.
No, I just read an article the other day on Quebec. There's greenhouses in Quebec, and they're growing strawberries in greenhouses, and they're making money. So that tells you there's still a way.
Yeah. No, there definitely is.
My brother always had a saying, and it was, you think you've arrived when you find something to do in a certain way. But my brother would always say there's always a better way. There's always a better way. And that's what you got to look for.
I think one of my favorite sayings from you is a penny saved is a penny earned.
Yeah.
And I think that having that mentality around the farm is very important. Is there like a favorite saying that you've heard from someone that you've applied to farming?
Yeah, that we had a salesman that sold us tractors and that. And he said to me one day, he said, Ron, you look after the nickels and the dollars look after themselves. And I was very shrewd at doing that. So maybe too shrewd sometimes.
Why do you think you've had so much prosperity in your life?
Well, my sister-in-law always said we could write an awful good book on our prosperity, but there's another page, and that's all the issues that we had to work through when a flock got sick and died, or when a flood took out a crop on the bottomland, or, but we just pushed on, so prosperity, I don't know how, I don't look at me as being a prosperous guy, but I guess I am. God has been good to us,
Yeah, I mean, and you wouldn't be able to tell. Like, you drive a very modest truck that's probably got a few too many dents in it.
Yeah, guys keep running into it on the farm, with
it's the guys, hey? Yeah. But I mean, like, and part of it is like this year, our farm, we've spent over $3 million this year on new equipment to innovate, right? $2.5 million on that new potato wash line. When you hear that, what are your thoughts? Do you think that's crazy, or do you think that that's good?
No, I've lived long enough to know that it comes to that point where you have to do those things, It's not foolish money. It's good money, well spent.
Yeah, that's what we try to tell the bank.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't own it. The bank does. Okay, Grandpa. Well, I want to say thank you for doing this today. I know a lot of people are really going to enjoy these nuggets of wisdom from you, and hopefully we can do another one of these podcasts again. We'll take more questions from our community. But before we go, do you want to leave with any parting wisdom for everyone?
Never give up. Always push on. And there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And you got to get there. So don't give up.
Awesome. Thanks, Grandpa. This has been the first episode of Potato Die and Grandpa Die eventually.